Hey everyone, welcome back to OCD Recovery's YouTube channel, where today I'm going to talk about compassion and how little compassion I had for myself and for others. I could sympathize seeing other people, what they went through, but because I didn't have any perspectives with unconditional self-life, other acceptance, I could see it, but I had no connection with that. And I certainly did not have any empathy for anyone through a connection because, I grew up, like I always say, I grew up pretty privileged. My parents were divorced, but they were still good friends. My father was an attorney. We lived a really good life. So I didn't have any hardships in my life per se to teach me any lessons. That's why I don't believe that age has really any direct correlation with wisdom. Just how money doesn't have any direct correlation with, I know Daisy's here today. I know, boo-boo. I know. How money doesn't have any direct correlation with happiness. Obviously, it can make someone very happy, depending on their belief systems and what their life looks like. And the same thing is true with age and wisdom. So in order for me to develop more empathy and sympathize with other people, I really had to go through a lot of hardships in my life myself, OCD suffering being one of them, losing my father to pancreatic cancer, 3 months later, losing my aunt to liver failure and liver disease, my mom's only sibling, and then losing our dog Lily, who we had basically, at least 10 years, maybe longer, all within basically like a 150-day period in 2018. And then things just got, really bad from there. Those are really tough experiences in my life, but I wouldn't trade them for anything. And that and the journey itself through OCD taught me a lot about life in ways that I don't think I would have developed through my natural course of my existence if I wouldn't have gone through, specifically OCD recovery. Before I go any further, please subscribe, hit that like button down below. Let me know what you think about this video. Again, this is a very important topic for me, just because I didn't put a lot of merit into this. So I never had any compassion for myself whatsoever. If I was doing something and I wasn't good at what I was doing, I wouldn't stop doing it. I didn't have a lot of people that go into analysis paralysis, but I definitely would beat myself up all the time and yell at myself, you're an idiot, you're not trying hard enough, you should be doing more, you're weak, etc., etc. And that didn't do me any good by any means whatsoever, because it didn't teach me any lessons in life, and I had no unconditional self-acceptance. I had very, very poor unconditional acceptance, if any. It'd be hard to have zero, but it was as low as you could be because I wasn't aware of the principles. I certainly did not have any unconditional other acceptance. If someone disagreed with me on the big topics, money, politics, religion, if someone disagreed with me on anything that had to do with academics, I had a huge fear of rejection being a chiropractor. The amount of people I would get into fights with and be like, I'm an evidence-based chiropractor, all because I was afraid of other people judging me. I got into a lot of disagreements when I got into practice with other medical providers, chiropractors I thought were being quacky, different physical therapists I thought were not using their brains, certainly a lot of medical doctors. And I had no perspective on how they were trained, why they saw things the way they did through their eyes. And I just was really rigid about these things. And I just did myself a major disservice. And I wanted to change that. And changing that, I knew would take an extended period of time on me being open-minded, not speaking, not recorrecting people, not telling people they were wrong, actually hearing people out. It doesn't mean I don't raise concerns. It doesn't mean I don't disagree with people. But, I really take in what Stephen Covey said, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He wrote another book, I believe in 92 or 93, called Principle-Centered Leadership, where in the opening few pages he says, these are the 3 things that really destroy relationships. And one of them was dying on every molehill and needing to argue about everything, whether that's in personal relationships. And people hear that and they're like, well, you're telling me to never bring anything up. No, you're jumping 0 to 100 and going to the other extreme. There's a balance proponent, but you're never going to get balance down correctly. If you're trying to be too perfectionistic about balance, you create another problem, a secondary and tertiary problem, which most people will do. So what I specifically wanted to work on was looking at speaking to myself kinder, no matter how much I failed, whilst also looking at my belief systems with the Ellis principles that I'm a fallible human and that there's no way that I'm going to get things right all the time. Some things I'll be naturally better at than others. Like most people in life, they have pros and cons to their behaviors and their perspectives, the way they were raised, their biology and genetics, the cultural, their environment they lived in. their history of doing this particular thing and seeing how that goes in their track record. And my track record was really bad. I had no track record of being nice to myself. And I had very little or no track record of accepting other people. So I knew that working on that was going to be very, very uncomfortable for me. But I want to make an actual effort at doing that, which meant that I had to get comfortable with looking stupid. That means I had to get comfortable with people talking behind my back and not trying to yell and prove them wrong. And I had to get more comfortable with practicing the language of compassion. I know, boo-boo, you go see wherever your brother is. Don't even think about licking me. Practicing compassion with Daisy, right? A lot of people get frustrated and take things out on their dogs. Maybe you're walking your dogs and you're going through OCD recovery and your dog's annoying you and you're like, come here, and you're yanking on that. I get all these things that people do. I mean, I did these things all the time, and I wanted to change that about myself. I just didn't like that I was acting always in an anger, vengeful way towards society and towards myself. And that meant a lot of things in my life had to change. I always think about that Jim Rohn statement. In order for the next 5 years to change, in order for the next 5 years to look different from the last 5 years, something has to change. Another good one he says, which is very simple, in order for things to change, you need to change. And I didn't take that seriously for quite a long time. I did not. I knew what had to change, but I didn't want to put that effort in because I knew putting the effort in would be very difficult. And I wanted to, do what I could to give myself the best opportunity to apply compassion for myself. Again, this doesn't mean I don't get frustrated with people. It doesn't mean I don't get frustrated with myself if I make the same mistakes over and over again. But I wanted to at least not create those secondary and tertiary problems by when I did make those mistakes, when I did mess things up, I could be a little bit nicer to myself on the back end of that. And a lot of people view compassion as a weakness. I know I did without even knowing I was doing that. It's why you hear so many people say, well, unconditional acceptance seems like a cheap way out. Maybe someone has harm OCD and they protecting themselves by having no sharp objects in the house. And we're talking about the perspectives of unconditional acceptance. And they say, understandably so, acceptance seems like a cheap way out. You're saying that, like, oh, I should do this. Like, I should be okay with doing this. No, acceptance doesn't mean agreement. That's why I always talk about expectations. I have very low expectations on my life. Now, I have a lot of drive and a lot of passion for things. I would say I have a lot of that. I've trained myself to do it. I've trained myself to work in environments where I don't feel like doing things. Like I always talk about making YouTube videos. I have a quota I try to meet for myself, which is 20 plus YouTube videos every month for years on end. That might seem like an easy, simple task, but it gets boring after a while. So I make the effort to do that no matter how I'm feeling. But if I miss something and I don't hit my quota, I don't beat myself up. I become problem focused, solution focused, and say, what can I do to change this? And then I go from there. This is a good case. She's literally the world's biggest brat. As she's gotten older, she's gotten more bratty. So, and I think it's a good skill to work on, and I think that when you're working on compassion, the main thing you have to remember is just because you're working on compassion doesn't necessarily mean you're going to take your foot off the gas and what you want to work on in your life. I know that was the big one for me. Oh, if I'm compassionate towards myself, it means the weakness. And you hear a lot of people on social media screaming from stages with millions of followers like, you got to be fucking David Goggins every second of your life. And you don't. There's nothing wrong with Goggins or any of those other people that do that. That works for them. They obviously have a lot of irrational beliefs. I don't think many of them would be open-minded to change because why would they? If I talk about acceptance with them, they're going to say, well, look at the things I've accomplished and you haven't accomplished 1/10 of what I've accomplished. Why would I listen to you? It's like, yeah, but you're also living in this mental prison in your head by also berating yourself all day. So, and when someone does have the best of both worlds, like let's just use Goggins for an example, the David Goggins mindset and mentality, if you want to live like that, but you also have unconditional acceptance, you're more than likely going to achieve more in life. There's no guarantee, but you'll give yourself a better opportunity because you're not spending all that time on your mind, analysis paralysis, beating yourself up. And I've heard many people be like, it's good to have shame and guilt. You're right, shame and guilt at healthy dosages. But if you have shame and guilt and beratement at unhealthy dosages, it's not good. You get locked up in that way, you don't live the life you want to live. And which you obviously have to accept that if you didn't achieve the things in your life you want to achieve, you can accept that too. So before I go any further, just please remember that, and I'll say it again, I'm going to just reiterate this on this video again for the 10th time. when you're working at unconditional self-life other acceptance. It does not mean that you have to stop with your desires and your goals. It just means when things go wrong, which they will, you're kinder to yourself and you're kinder to other people. It does not mean you're not going to get annoyed. You're a human being and things are going to annoy you in this life. Phil at OCDrecovery.com. Hope to hear from you soon. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day.